When I was 3, my parents moved us into a new neighborhood. The house was nice, but kind of old. The neighborhood was an old 50s tract home area, so it had a pretty varied group of people living there. As soon as we moved in, my dad started to notice weird things with me. He would hear me giggling and laughing in my room, and whenever he went in and asked what was so funny, I would tell him that the kids were being funny. He would also come in to wake me up and find me curled up in the closet. This happened over and over again, but my parents didn't think much of it because I was a pretty imaginative kid. The thing that wigged them out the most was that I flat out refused to walk out the front door. I would scream and yell and cry until one of my parents carried me in and out of the house. When you walked in the front door, to the right there was a closet, and to the left there was a low brick wall that separated the front room from the living room. It was about 4 feet high and about 3 feet long, just a room divider, but I never touched it or wanted to be near it. After we lived there for a few months, my dad started making some renovations to the house. Among them was demolishing the wall. My parents dropped my brother and I off with our grandparents the day they were going to do it so that we wouldn't be underfoot. We didn't end up going home for a week. When my dad knocked down the wall, he called the police. Inside the brick wall were bones that turned out to be from children. The cops never did figure out who put them there. The house had been owned by a lot of people, many of them who had rented it out, so it's just one of the many weird things that happened in my town that was never figured out. I was walking through the presser hall at Hollins University alone. My wife was on the campus meeting with some of her friends who went there with her. It was in late May and classes were all over and there were a few people around. I had heard this hall was pretty haunted and went to see it. I walked through the entire place, both stories, and didn't see anyone around. On my way out, I decided to try an EVP with my phone recorder. I asked if anyone had anything to say. Right before the exit was a woman's bathroom. The door was propped open with a doorstop, so I went in, turned around, and left. On my way out, I felt the wind on my back and realized that the door had closed and followed me out, but it didn't quite shut all the way. I didn't hear the doorstop scuff at all, and it was still in place. After that, I was too weirded out to stick around. I was in my room when I heard this loud crash come from the doorway of my home. I went out to where it was and saw that an angel sculpture had fallen onto the floor. The thing is that the sculpture string was placed on a metal hook, and the only way for it to be taken down is taking the string and pulling it up and over the hook. There's no way that it would just fall. The string would have been compromised, and it wasn't. I didn't think much of it until I looked at the settings on my iPhone because I wanted to see how much space I had left. I was planning on going somewhere and taking a lot of videos. The space left was 6.66 gigabyte. I couldn't help but think of the whole "the devil is a fallen angel" thing. It was pretty creepy. I heard someone shaking my locked door in the middle of the night for about a minute. It woke me up. I opened the door and my dog started barking like crazy looking down the stairs. That's where my room is, although she's usually asleep on a bed at the end of the upstairs hallway. I woke up my dad and we went downstairs. He's on the 3rd floor. I'm on the 2nd. We went to the 1st. And all the doors were locked. The living room light was on. Also, I have a doorway separating 2 sides of my room, and I hang a mirror box that can be opened to store jewelry and trinkets. It makes a distinct noise if you quickly move it or shake it. I heard someone shaking it a few weeks ago, and it woke me up. Next morning, the baseball bat I keep next to my bed was on the ground. That was really weird, because the bat was leaning against the wall, and the bottom part was inside of a box filled with junk. In the morning, it was completely on the floor, but the box was untouched. But I don't really care, as long as it's not a robber. When I was a kid, I woke up in the middle of the night to my bed shaking. Normally, this would scare the crap out of me, but instead, I was just kind of annoyed. I rolled over and muttered, "Stop it." The shaking stopped immediately. Then, a male voice speaks right beside me saying, "Sorry." That's when I freaked out. I'm pretty sure my childhood house was haunted. We rented a house that never felt like home. You always felt creeped out walking in there like you were being watched. My boyfriend and our roommate both worked nights, so I would be there by myself a lot. One night, I was doing my usual stuff and watching some TV before bed. I had this overwhelming feeling all night that I should avoid the hallway and not look directly down it. It was creepy. The feeling of being watched and terrified lasted about 2 hours before I decided to suck it up and make my way to the room. I left the hallway lights on and went to bed. Just as I turned off the side table light, I heard a drawer being pulled out and hitting the stopper. I turned on the light and nothing was out of place. This went on about 6 times before I decided I was sleeping with the light on. I curled up under the covers and waited for the boyfriend to get home. He comes rolling in about 3 a.m. He's laughing at me for being such a scaredy cat, gets into bed and turns the light off, and that's when everything broke loose. All the doors down the hallway slammed shut one by one, then our closet doors started rattling. The sound coming from inside could only be described as total destruction. It sounded like the shelves, the pole, and everything in there were being tossed around. The boyfriend joined me under the covers and we were both terrified. After it stopped, it took 5 to 10 minutes to convince him to go check around the house. Nothing was out of place, and our roommate had drove 3 hours back home that night to be with his family, so we knew it wasn't him. We slept with the light on for the rest of the night and moved out soon after. I still can't drive by that house without being creeped out. I was sitting in our office room alone when I was 19. I was typing a paper for one of my college classes. The office room used to be my sister's room before she moved out, so a lot of her decorations are still there. She had a photo of a mountain range, an oval-shaped mirror, and 3 different hangings that read faith, hope, and love. This makes 5 total things hanging on the wall in the room. Suddenly, I got random chills, which happens all the time. It was pretty cold. But this time, as soon as I got the chills, everything in the room hanging on the walls fell off simultaneously. This really freaked me out, but it got a tiny bit worse. I got up and walked out of the room only to notice everything hanging on a wall in my house had fell, besides the television in my room. All the pictures in the living room and other rooms, all the trophies in my room from Little League sports, and even a stand that held candles. I wasn't sure what to do. I picked up all the stuff and hung it back up, which actually took me around 15 to 20 minutes. Then I drove to campus to finish my paper. Never told my parents. It's also worth mentioning this happened around noon on a sunny day 3 winters ago. I preface this by saying that I am not religious and I do not believe in the paranormal. That said, it was the month of November and I was visiting Edinburgh, Scotland. It was cold and I was layered in a long-sleeved shirt, sweatshirt, and winter jacket. In the evening, my friends and I decided to go on one of the haunted walking tours that takes you through the vaults beneath the city. They are, of course, rumored to be haunted by the poor, destitute, and deplorable people who died gruesome deaths therein. One underground vault is said to house a particularly demonic spirit. It is said to be trapped within the confines of a circle of stone built by Wiccans to protect the living from its unfettered evil. While standing alongside the stone circle, my friend, who herself is Wiccan, began chanting barely intelligibly under her breath. I suddenly felt a flurry of wind at my neck. Then, nails dug deeply into the flesh of my back and dragged down my body from my shoulders to my waist. I was completely frozen in fear, too shocked to scream, although I was filled with white-hot pain. I spent the rest of the tour petrified, and when we emerged from the tunnels, I ran over to the bathroom of a pub where I pulled off all my clothes, which themselves were perfectly intact, only to see bright red marks lining the naked skin of my back. I've told my friends and family this story, and they think it should be enough for me to cave and believe in the supernatural. I still don't, but I also can't explain what happened in those tunnels underground. I was home alone once when my parents were out of town. We had just moved into our house, so there was an empty lot next to our house with a house half built. My parents were the types to leave the outdoor side garage door unlocked. Dumb, I know. Well, while they were gone, I was watching TV, and all of a sudden, the door that leads into my garage from the inside starts to wiggle. I put my TV on mute and I listen again. I see it actually move that time. I start freaking out and I'm kind of in shock looking for the phone. I can't find the house phone, so I search for my cell. Remembered I left my charger in my parents' car, so I'm frantically looking for the house phone. Our house was so new, my mom hadn't even put blinds or drapes up in the kitchen or living room. Well, whoever was wiggling my garage doorknob starts banging on the windows in my living room. Again, no blinds or phone, and at that moment, I realize this guy is seeing my every move, so I shoot upstairs. Again, looking frantically for the phone and also trying to figure out how and where I'd jump out of my house to get away from the maniac that's outside of my house if I needed to. He then starts pounding on my front door. I can tell at that point he's using something metal or plastic by the sounds of the thumps. I really thought he was going to shoot my door open. I remember at that moment I was mad at myself for being a dumb teenager that frequently talked on the phone, because I always just left it lying around, never putting it back on the base. I wanted so badly to push the button that detects where the house phone is, but I thought if he heard where it was, he'd break the window nearest to it and take it. I then remembered I left the phone in my mom's room, and as I pass the hallway to her room, I see two people pacing in front of my house. I'm freaking out trying to find my dad's gun in my parents' bedroom. I find the phone and call 911. As I'm on the phone, the window breaks. I'm upstairs and scared to death. Suddenly, everything goes silent. I'm waiting in my parents' pitch-black closet for what seems like an eternity, then I hear the sirens. Cops show up, but there is no one to be found. I figured they hadn't gone too far since it had just occurred. Cops never found my tormentors. On the plus side, the company building the house next door, same company that built ours, hired overnight security to stay on our street until the house was built, which was definitely refreshing.